figured we should start in some way. My name is Peter Sarama. I'm the chair of the Communications and Media Studies Department. I won't be long. I'll actually be extremely short because all the merit for the and the kudos for the organization of tonight and getting Annelys here to talk about this amazing project that she's been doing and taking around goes to Anna. So I'm going to leave Professor Gorchakaya to sort of introduce the project and introduce everything else, but I just wanted to thank everyone and hopefully there'll be more of this. Remember the workshop on Friday for those of you who are interested. So I'll pass this on to them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Can you all hear me all right? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I'm not going to take up a lot of your time either, right? So my goal here is to introduce Annelys, to introduce the event, to say just a few words about the reasons also why we decided to invite Annelys here. It doesn't all have to do with my personal obsession with maps. Actually, there are other much better reasons here as well. So first of all, right, a few words about Annelys. So Annelys de Wet is a Belgium-based designer, researcher, and educator. She completed her PhD at St. Lucas, Antwerp, so with the dissertation Disarming Design, Politics of Participatory Practices, and she currently teaches in the MA context, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about that, socio-political program at St. Lucas School of Arts, Antwerp. So the two projects that Annelys has been working on in the last couple of years, one is Disarming Design, but the project that we're going to be mostly dedicating our attention to today is the subjective atlas of different locations. As you're going to see, right, the 2 decades of the project definitely were quite prolific, I would say. And one of the reasons we really wanted to invite Annelys to talk about this is to actually introduce the very methodology, right, of alternative cartographies and the idea of talking about counter mapping, which is something that is quite transversal. I see here today students from our department, Media and Communications department, also art and design students, right? I also know that we have a course on critical mapping, and I think it is really interesting to kind of see how the specific instrument can be kind of transversally used, right, and adapted to so many different realities. My students from visual activism department are here, and they know a lot about mapping and counter mapping at this point. So I think that it is really important to address, right, the instrument, and of course one of the reasons we invited Annelys is to talk specifically about that, right, how the methodology works, what does it mean to counter map, what does it really mean to hack the very notion of map, right, as a colonial system, as a power dynamic, and then of course, and this is sort of a little anticipation, we're also going to dedicate some of our time and attention to a couple of different case studies. Here you can see the different editions that have been produced over the span of 20 years at this point, right? So 2 decades of activity, and there are a lot more than these. I think there are 14 editions that have been produced so far, and the 15th one is about to come out, and the one subject and the one case study that we're going to be talking about is this one, which is the subjective atlas of Palestine, and I think that Annelys will use that a lot as a sort of a starting point for a conversation about counter mapping and about its politics, poetics, right? And I think that this specific atlas that came out in 2007 can guide us, right? And somehow provide so many examples around that. On a more personal note, I also wanted to say that, kind of to add, right, that this is an event that also marks an important collaboration for us. We're actually embarking on a new journey, which is a new chapter, which is the Subjective Atlas of Rome. We're starting to work on it right now, and this is a project that will be curated by Annelys de Wet and then co-curated by myself and Chiara Garlanda, who's present here in the audience. So now that I provided you with all of these spoilers for what Annelys de Wet is going to talk about, I'm actually happy to pass on. And thank you so much for being here and for taking the time. And thank you all for being here tonight as well.
Thank you, Anna, so much for this beautiful introduction, and thank you, Anna and Chiara, for inviting me, and the Cabot University for hosting this event and giving space to kick off making a subjective atlas of Rome. And thank you all for coming here tonight. It's my honor to be here. I think that the introduction of Anna was very good. Oh, this is backwards. But I'll give a short introduction of myself. I'm raised in the Netherlands, but now live for almost 2 decades in Belgium. I'm trained as a graphic designer in the last century, and a big part of my practice is the development of the subjective atlases that I will talk about tonight. These publications that map regions from inside out by the inhabitants themselves. One of the, I just have to discover the technique well. Yes. So the one of the subjective atlas of Palestine was made in 2007. It was also my first serious encounter with the history of the occupation of Palestine, which I was not really informed about, raising up in the Netherlands and having traditional school education, which is really leaving out the Palestinian narrative. And then going to Palestine and then working with a lot of artists and designers there really opened my eyes, not only for the history of the occupation and our European complicity, but also about what artistic practice can do to counter and to imagine other kinds of futures and to practice other ways of being in the world and to also work towards systems of justice. After having been in Palestine and working with the artists there, it never left me. And I worked together with the artist Khaled Orani, and with him in 2012 or 11, I started a thought-provoking design label, Disarming Design from Palestine. That's how we coined it. Design that can disarm, ultimately disarm the occupation, at least kind of the representation and the narratives connected to it. And since then, almost every year we organized workshops where we made artisanal products in Palestine with Palestinian artisans, design students, artists, and some international artists. And that became then this design label. I will briefly say something about it in my presentation. But then every year, kind of working in Palestine, or mostly in the West Bank, but also 1 year in Jerusalem, also 1 year in Gaza, 1 year in a refugee camp in Jordan with Palestinian refugees, really also opened another perspective of like how to learn. Because for my first time being in Palestine, I think in 2 weeks I learned more than ever I learned in my, I don't know, 18 years or 16 years of history education at my traditional schools, public schools in the Netherlands. So I wanted to give this experience or exposure also to my students. I brought them several times, but then there was something so poignant about being there, working together, being with your body in a space, feeling, working with the artisans, that many people ask, well, but a workshop of 2 weeks is too short. Can't we expand it? Can't we make it a longer program? And that resulted in a master's program in Amsterdam that I founded called Disarming Design, which is really focused on design practices in situations of oppression and how can design be a form of emancipation, resilience, resistance, activism. And that was that ran from 2020 to 2022. Here you see the graduation photo of the students. But why I want to say this as an introduction is that now it looks simple on the slide, but of course it comes with a lot of challenges. Also personal challenges, kind of to unlearn the histories, unlearn the language that you use, to think, okay, who am I as a white Western European woman in a Palestinian context, working together, how to talk about it, what kind of words to use. And I felt that through making I was able to respond, but through language I was behind. And there was an incentive to apply for a PhD. Which I did, to really think through these ways of collaborating and also to think through more effective design practices in working with politically charged situations and think, okay, how through artistic practice can we respond and engage and be in dialogue with each other on different ways than language does. So that's what I did. Finished that last year, and right now I'm editing a book. But while I was writing the book, the genocide started, and I didn't know how to continue writing. I didn't know how to find my words back. So the book's supposed to be ready this year, but I hope it comes out next year. I'm still editing it. But before I present, I just want, also in this space, I want to express my unwavering support for the Palestinian struggle for a life in dignity, justice and freedom. And I would also really like to acknowledge the people of Rome in their collective denial or the collective refusal of being part of the systems that the systems of complicity in the genocide. And it was really empowering in Belgium, in the Netherlands, to see the news and to see so many people here on the streets speaking out, blocking the highways. So I want to acknowledge that. But the violence we see in Palestine today is not new. It is part of a long lineage of dispossession, partitioning, and forced narration of identity. Let me start by one of its instruments, the nation-state defining world map, that frames land as territory to be owned, defended, extracted from, and controlled. The map as a coded, flattened representation that represents life defined into strict boundaries, and in doing so, erasing the plurality that actually exists on the ground. However, maps are generally perceived to be neutral, impartial, as the distances can be measured, the information can be checked, and the visual language appeals scientifically. But coding means making choices, simplifying and discarding many layers of information. Which choices are made is dependent on the conditions in which a map is constructed. What does the cartographer know about the place? What are the technical availabilities? Which focal points are central? Who is mapped in and what is mapped out? Who paid for it? And how will it be distributed? Depending on who makes these choices, and why, how, and when, and where, maps will be different. And as such, maps are never neutral. They are cultural, political, and ideological documents. They convey worldviews and power relations. And because they look objective, they naturalize borders, categories, histories, and hierarchies that are anything but natural. And that makes any choice that is made in the context of a graphic geography also a political one. In other words, the history of cartography is written from a top-down perspective. A striking historic example is this one. I guess, who knows what it is? Can you say?
It's the dividing up of Africa, of the different European countries, colonialists.
So this is the Berlin Convention of 1884 and 1885. And during this conference, 13 European nations, including Italy, the United States and the Ottoman Empire came together to define regions in which each European power had an exclusive right to pursue the legal ownership of lands. So the map of Africa is made in Berlin, without any person from the ground joining the discussion on where borders should be and if there should be borders. So Africa was divided, at that conference, Africa was divided in 40 countries, of which 36 were under European control. And so that's the colonial map. And then if you look at the map of today, the majority of the borderlines are still the same. And then there's this map that was made in the 60s, also problematic because it shows also borders between tribes. But I use it because it shows something else, is that there were, at that time in the 19th century, more than 11,000 tribes in Africa, and this map tries to show where were the tribes. And then, for instance, here you see like the black is the borderline drawn in Berlin, and then the colors are the kind of the mapping of the tribe, and to see like how people were divided sometimes into 4 countries. But this is how we encounter the world and what we think of the division of the world is. This is my son a few years ago. He went to high school in Brussels, and so he got the National Atlas of Belgium as his school book. And so when we got this atlas, the first thing that we were looking at was like, how is Palestine mapped in his atlas? And what struck us, between Palermo and Paleo, there was nothing. No existence of Palestine in the National Atlas of Belgium. However, Israel was mapped. And if you go to that space of page, there you see Israel and no mention of Palestine, and only even like Samaria and Judea, so the Israeli naming of land in bigger type than Westelijke Jordaanoever, which is West Bank. So it prioritizes the Israeli narrative of land that is also, according to all our international agreements, belongs to the Palestinian people. Not much later, my son had a test at school, and one of the questions was, can you note 2 countries with their contemporary names that once were part of the East Roman Empire? So my son answered, Greece and Palestine. And then the teacher said, no, this is wrong, because not everybody recognizes Palestine. And so this is kind of what happened. So yeah, I wrote a letter to the teacher, being quite indignant, and I said, or an indignant letter, I said, well, my son has been to Palestine, he has seen with his own eyes that it exists, that there's people, that there's land. And then, well, she said, okay, I correct the answer, but yeah, as a history teacher, I have to follow the objective narrative. So I was curious also about Italy. And then, thanks to Chiara, I was able to see, to check the most prominent Italian atlas. And to my surprise, Palestine exists, also in the United States. But when we zoom in, of course, there's no total mention of Palestine, but at least, it says it a bit over the West Bank, but also, over what we call Israel, but here in Gaza Strip, nothing. So it's also very ambiguous how Palestine is mapped. And then here in the other atlas, also Palestine doesn't exist. So this is how we encounter the world, how we think of identities, of nations, of existence. And in this context, I would like to quote Helga Tawil Suri. She's a Palestinian-American scholar, and what she says is that, and it was actually part of a review of the Subjective Atlas of Palestine, she says, maps of any territory are expressions of ideological and political values, functioning as symbolic elements that reflect abstract and concrete national and local sentiments and goals. The politics of map making and the power maps serve is part of a process of territorial socialization. Moreover, map production is a process structured by political and social norms and values, whether the cartographer is aware of it or not. Mapping is an interpretive act, in which the map conveys not merely facts, but also in all ways the author's intentions and values. So the politics of mapping, however, lie not only in what one maps, but also in how one maps. And me as a designer, this is where I feel I'm called upon, it's where I can do something. Because traditionally you are not invited to make a map of the place you inhabit. The territory is already mapped for you by an unnamed and therefore seemingly position-free source. It is my opinion that maps should represent a multitude of factors that influence the places they claim to illustrate. Because like most of the maps, also the ones that we see in the traditional atlases, they represent the world as a singular representation, saying, okay, this is in, this is out, this is water, this is land, this is Italy, this is Germany. Well, in reality, there's so many different interpretations and realities existing at the same moment at the same place. So I suggest that maps are to be produced through a collaborative process. And here design can play a meaningful role in supporting different kinds of mapping trajectories. As I mentioned, the one, making the Subjective Atlas of Palestine was really a transformative experience. And it was maybe by making this atlas that I really understood the problem and the complicities of the atlases that we used and that we are educated with. So I explored these questions of mapping during a workshop in 2007 in collaboration with artist Khaled Hourani, which was hosted by the International Academy of Arts in Palestine. Together with almost 30 artists, designers, photographers, architects, and other bright spirits, we mapped Palestine through their perspectives, their lived experiences, their situated knowledge. In the intimate visualizations that were shared, they bear both a traumatic history of occupation and land theft, as well as a pride in and celebration of local heritage, spanning tastes, flowers, ceramics, embroidery, and sceneries. It was in the extensive collection of images and artworks of the family house where artist Baha Bukhari grew up, at the Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem, that I witnessed the injustice and trauma of the denial of access to Jerusalem by the occupying forces. Blocking him due to his West Bank ID, Bukhari was not allowed to live nor visit his own house at only 15 kilometers away from his current home downtown Ramallah. The collection of documents that I needed to travel outside Palestine by Majdi Hadid unveiled the unjust restrictions of international travel for Palestinians, more than words could say. Artist Shuruk Harab pointed at the lack of a national currency by showing the different currencies in which Palestinian employees receive their salaries. A police officer gets Israeli shekels, a university professor gets Jordanian dinars, a freelance producer gets euros, and curator Fada gets American dollars at the academy, even though the school was supported by Norwegian krones. Drawing this further, Shuruk Harab shedded the light on the ubiquity of money exchange offices and officers. An action that you clearly always lose money by changing money. Artist Taysir Barakat had collected letters written by prisoners to their loved ones. My beloved mother, how are you, my father? I learned to read and write, mother. Greetings to all, your son Ali. And when we arrived one day too late at the academy because we got lost, artist Majd Abdelhamid responded with a sense of jealousy. I wish I would be able to get lost. I cannot. I grew up here, and each road ultimately is a dead end for me. He drew a map of Ramallah that located the separation wall, prisons, illegal settlements, and checkpoints, blocking most roads leaving the city. Artist Sulaiman Mansour tastefully photographed 12 ways to eat chickpeas, emphasizing the main ingredient of Palestinian cuisine while indirectly critiquing the appropriation of it by Israeli food culture. And film director Mohamed Yacoubi offered a series of photographs of skillful details of Palestinian dresses, a heritage that is forcefully pushed into oblivion or appropriated by Israeli national narratives. There's a lot more to say about this atlas, and for that I refer to the book itself. Maybe we could give it to the audience. And also maybe this article that I wrote about making the subjective atlas, published in a special issue of the Journal of British Geographers. If you read the QR code, you can get the article. And with my presentation today, I want to unpack the aspect of collective mapping as a tool for alternative storytelling, situated knowledge production, and as an act of resistance. So after the Subjective Atlas of Palestine was published, more invitations, or more people were reaching out, saying, okay, we would also like to have a Subjective Atlas of Hungary, like here. And then we organized a workshop there with a community in 2010. Then Taki Shaheen, a curator from Karachi, reached out and said, can't we make a Subjective Atlas of Pakistan? And so we did in 2015. Being based in Brussels, there was the opportunity to make a Subjective Atlas of Brussels, so that was partly my own initiative. It was, I felt, okay, me as a Brussels resident, I feel I have agency to start it. All the other atlases are always on the request of someone. With the art space and casino in Luxembourg, the most recent one is the Subjective Atlas of Amsterdam, the city that shaped my design practice. And it was made on the request of the Architecture Center in Amsterdam, who really wanted to have a counter discourse around the architect, the built environment in Amsterdam through other kind of perspectives of people who are normally not part of the architecture discourse. In 1 month, number 15 comes out, which is the Atlas of Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is now being printed. Then, at this moment, I'm also working with a group in Lubumbashi, in Congo, at Picha Art Center on the Subjective Atlas of Lubumbashi, coming out next year. We're working in the Philippines with some community there, and that will come out in 27 probably. Maybe we can also, these atlases can also go through it so you can see it. So I hope that these books can open political scopes to contribute to a more pluralistic and intuitive territorial identification and representation. I see these subjective atlases as explorations of the individual in relation to the collective, the subjective in relation to the apparent objective, the visible in relation to the erased, the personal in relation to the political. These atlases together invest in how collective memory can rebuild and reclaim the narratives of a place. They derive from the wish to contribute to destabilize the very orthodoxy of cartography itself by reframing what we expect from an atlas and by including subjectivities in cartographies and by offering a wider possibility of interpretation. However, although the focus of this project is to publish a book, like you have in your hands now, the object of the book itself is not the main goal, nor the final outcome. I see the book as an instrument to activate the collaborative process. It's the incentive to come together. It's the object that enables momentum. It's a platform that offers space for all voices to come together. So I would like to kind of frame or position the subjective atlas as a mediator and catalyzer to stimulate a visual dialogue, to create a catalogue of opportunities in which art and design are used as mediums to allow collective discussions and where different voices and languages can coexist. So in making each atlas, over the years, there's some kind of methodology that is developed or came across. And in short, this is it. So it starts to pointer. Yeah. So someone takes the initiative, then we organize, then we come together, we organize it, we organize workshops, invite artists, we design it, we publish it, and then hopefully transform the world into a more liquid representation. But maybe to go a bit more in detail in these different steps. So what's very important is that each atlas starts with an invitation. It's not me going somewhere, it's someone reaching out and then asking, could we make an atlas together? Like this year, when I met Anna in Amsterdam, during a workshop and a masterclass at the University of Amsterdam, and we were in conversation, Anna said, well, maybe we should make an atlas of Rome. And the conversation was very inspiring. So after that, we started to connect and organize. So there's normally there's a producer, designer, institutes, resources, very important, and subjective editions. And we come together to figure out, okay, how do we work together? What's the focus, or to what kind of dominant narrative or certain representation is the atlas a counter mapping? What do we want to counter? And so if we want to do that, in which communities should we work with? So in April, Anna sent an email asking, hey, can we continue talking? And so we were sitting this afternoon, continue talking with Chiara. The email was from Anna and Chiara. And now, standing here and talking with you and really, opening the conversation and also seeing, okay, how do we want to do it? And it's really also a collaborative process to see, okay, who's connected, what are the voices we need to focus on or need to put forward, who should be part, how should we do it, how can we find support. So this is kind of where we are at. It's the intention and to see how things can evolve. And this Friday we have our first workshop in order to make the first maps of Rome. Normally after that, then it really starts, and we organize different kind of workshops, normally hosted by different institutes or organizations, and they invite participants often. So it's like there's someone wanting an atlas, seeing, okay, with what kind of communities or spaces, and then they say, ask their communities to come to workshops and invite them to map their perspective based on their own lived experience. During these workshops, often one of the first questions is, can you draw a map of Rome and give your map a title? In this case, you see people drawing the map of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And then after that, here this is in Amsterdam, we put these maps on the wall and ask people, okay, can you explain why did you make the map the way you made it? And often these conversations are really interesting because there's other kind of perspectives that open up than in normal conversation arises. Another question that we ask here, this is the mapping workshop for a subjective atlas of Groningen, province in the Netherlands. Then can you make an alternative flag for Rome? In Groningen we ask for Groningen. And give the map a title, or the flag a title. And then here you see what we did in Bosnia-Herzegovina. After it was only 1 hour, and we had this whole wall full of alternative maps and titles, and particularly this kind of the tension between the title and the abstract figures of a flag is really where the story arises, or where the tension comes. And I think that this is really interesting in the map. It's all the time this tension between language and image, and how language guides your interpretation of an image. And then maybe one of the most crucial questions is, like, can you map, in your case Rome, from your personal perspective, through a particular phenomenon, experience, or observation that is close to you? Here you see it in Lubumbashi. And this is something people can take more time. But during the workshop we often kind of start to think and have different references, examples, talk about different experiences, so then other topics come to the fore. And then over the years, certain guidelines became prominent. So for instance, the focus is on the present. What does the place mean now, from being here at this moment in time? The information that is being mapped is rooted in lived, situated experience and has a social, cultural, political dimension. It's centered on observation. The interpretation is to the reader. So it's really important that people map things, topics, perspectives that they relate to. So you don't map the life of another. It's really about, maybe you can make a map together with your grandmother or together with the taxi driver, but it's not, you don't map other people's realities, but really that you connect to it yourself and you activate your own knowledge. And it's also by living at a certain place that you think this is something that needs to gain more attention or be more focused on. Then we ask participants to translate the cartographic narratives into a visual form, like a graph, drawing, map, or photo series. The atlas prioritizes the image over text. It's the visual that carries the narrative, while the text functions as credit. So it's always really a thinking, and that's what we also do with the workshop. How can you translate a certain sentiment or a certain critique or a certain perspective into kind of a simple visual form? And you will see in the atlas some forms are very simple, but it took some time in order to figure out, okay, that's what we need to capture to address a certain point. Per contribution, the focus is limited to one topic or perspective. So we try to be kind of have clear points of view, not that there's 5 stories, even though things can be layered. But I think that the strength in the atlas is also the relationship between the different contributions. It's not that everything is in one contribution, but one is talking about shoes and the other one about the road and the other one about the weather, but then you see how they actually relate. The material is made or collected by the artist, copyright free, so you don't use found footage, but you make the material yourself. The work should get a strong title that locates the intention of the work, and we ask everyone to write a short introduction for the work in the first perspective, describing the intention behind the choice of the mapping. When that's done, all kind of contributions come in, and we start to really edit and design it to bring things together. And then, for instance, you see that the maps that you just saw the video of can look like this. So I show you a few examples of the atlas of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Here also collection of maps. And here's the mappings of the region. For instance, in Sarajevo, there's a lot of buildings that things might fall off. And so there's a sign, so then people are warned. And I guess there's a legal urge to have this sign. It's a 0-kilometer bus ticket. Yasmina, who's there on the photo, she lives in a village, a small village, and she says, each time I'm waiting for the bus, someone from the village is saying, hey, I give you a lift. So she hardly ever needs to take the bus. So she wanted to express this kind of generosity of the village by portraying all the people that had given her a lift. Amina Bergic, who wants to, no, this is not Amina, this is Duldina Kurtovic, honoring the juices that her mother makes every year, from apples, lemons, grapes. Netzada Avdik, she's from the diaspora, so I think she lives in Austria, but every year they go to Bosnia and they have this big purple bag, and every year this big purple bag comes back full of Bosnian food. And this year, this was all the things that were there in the purple bag. Laila Joldic, How We Cure Our Wounds. This is Zia Gavik, he's a photographer, and he actually photographed objects that were collected from mass graves from the genocide in '94. This is Amina Bergic, and she lives in Srebrenica, and she said that her grandmother always knits these socks. And each time she visited her grandmother, and she says, "Oh, grandmother, these socks are so beautiful." I said, "Okay, they're yours." And she says, "No, I have this extreme collection of socks, but they're all made by my grandmother." And so she brought them during the workshop, and then decided to photograph them. And this is her collection of socks, all made by her grandmother. These are glossary of favorite terms. So it was many people were asked, "What is your favorite Bosnian word?" And they're here, like, I can't pronounce them, but they mean like, it's raining, slowly, calm, longing for real human being. And this is how the alternative flags then turn up. So we digitalize them in outlines, and then they become a collection of alternative flags, and really also forming a visual dialogue of perspectives that you can have on the country, and also breaking with the singularity of one national flag. So when all this content is put together in an atlas, then we produce the book, we print it. Well, first we share it with all the contributors to say, okay, do you agree with the way your work is represented? Can we print it? Are there still spelling mistakes? And then when everything is fine, then we print it. And then comes really the very important aspect is really activating the book. Because, as I said, the book is an instrument to bring people together, but also to stimulate this visual dialogue. So it's not about the exclusivity of the book, but really about the distribution of the images and how can we stimulate this distribution. And so one of the things is that all the books are printed under Creative Commons, really stimulating that the work is being reproduced instead of trying to protect it from reproduction. So this is one example. Someone asked, like, oh, can we make postcards from these alternative flags from the Netherlands? And so it became a postcard series. Here is in Bogota, in Colombia. We made an exhibition with all kind of objects that people showed or made during the workshops. So it became really a spatial way of the Subjective Atlas. When we launched the Subjective Atlas of Brussels, we had a subjective evening in which participants talked about their contribution. That was very inspiring. Similar thing we did with the Atlas of Serbia, and we also had a book launch in Amsterdam. And then Fouk, he's a the inhabitant of the room that you can see here photographed. We invited him, and also you can see his guitar in his room, and then he played his favorite songs during the book lounge. And so then the book really comes to life, and the book becomes kind of a framework or an incentive to open up the different stories. Here's the subjective atlas of Palestine that has been reproduced more than maybe more than any other atlas. And I think it was also after we made the subjective atlas of Palestine and seeing how this reproduction, how important it was, that was also the moment we decided, okay, we should facilitate that. And since then, all the books were published under Creative Commons. But the Atlas of Palestine, I don't know if you noticed it, but it's in English. It's not in Arabic, while Palestinians speak Arabic. So while we were doing the workshop, some people asked, like, but why is the book in English? Why is it not in our own language? But at that time, we had some support from a Dutch NGO, and we addressed the issue with them, and they said, okay, maybe we can do this first version in English, and we make sure that there's more resources to make a bilingual book. And so we were able to do that. So after this English version was published, we gave the InDesign document to a Palestinian designer, Munter, and he made it completely bilingual. It was printed in Palestine, and then it was really distributed in Palestine. While the ones that we did at first was printed in the Netherlands, we shipped them to Ramallah. They were shipped back. They were refused somehow and also damaged. So then the publisher sent another box of books with 50 books again to Palestine, and then said, okay, let's use an address in Jerusalem. And this box never arrived. So it was really awkward. So I make this book with all these people, and then it's really, they don't even get their own copy of the book. And that also made me aware also of how the limits of distribution, and how like in the Western countries and structures, we can easily distribute books, and people have some kind of budget to buy books, but it's also very limited. And so how to think through this kind of distribution. And so therefore also the PDF is something that distributes, the reproduction is what distributes, and it really triggered the ways of thinking, okay, how can we stimulate this distribution? And then when this one was printed in Palestine, in the West Bank, President Abbas really liked it, and then he bought 100 copies and then used it as a relational gift. So it was interesting how this bottom-up initiative then became kind of a political instrument to address the human and cultural situation. So these are examples of like how the atlas can really be an incentive to open up other initiatives, other ways of activating the mappings that might not always be intentional and beforehand, but to think also as a designer, I think, okay, we should think of the infrastructure in which things exist, not only in how it looks or how it's designed or what it means, but also in what kind of context and infrastructure does it exist, and how can we think through this infrastructure in space and time and distribution. So I think that's really something that throughout the years became more apparent also to me to focus on more and to really think through these collaborations, the ways of working. One thing that it was leading to was this design label, and I just briefly want to touch upon it after I drink some water. Go. Yes. So after I made the atlas, I stayed in contact with the people I met, and then in 2011 we started a new collaboration, and actually also telling stories from Palestine based on lived experience, but not through alternative cartography, but through artisanal objects. So we organize workshops, we visit the artisans, see how are they making things, and how can, based on their ways of making and the available resources, can we develop new products. So here, over the years, we have now a collection of, I think, 60 designs that each, on a certain way, tell something about Palestine. I just want to there's a lot to tell about, but I just want to briefly touch upon it and give a few examples. Like this is the bird plate by Maher Shagin. It's a hand-painted ceramic plate for sharing food leftovers with the birds as a response to a very generous or big hospitality culture in Palestine. This is Palestine with an M, reflecting on it's a dysfunctional sand clock, reflecting on the inability for Palestinian people to control time. Because it's always unpredictable. Is there a checkpoint? Can you travel? Can you not? And time is not something that can be given back to you. So this is a product that one side is predictable, the other side is very unpredictable. This is a watchtower and water tanks game full of watchtowers and water tanks, but it's impossible to play because it's fully occupied. Here is the keffiyeh bandage. So we turned keffiyehs into bandage, which you can use to heal wounds. This is the keffiyeh bandage to heal wounds mentally and physically. And maybe you noticed I'm wearing these earrings by Ibrahim Moutadi from Gaza. And it's a poem by Mahmoud Darwish. One side it says, "We enjoy life," and the other one says, "Whenever we can." And he made it in 2015. This is the watermelon flag. And this particular depiction of the watermelon is made by Khaled Hourani, who made it as an alternative flag for the Atlas of Palestine. And then, so this is now a design label Belgium-based organization, and we continue to produce and continue to really distribute these products to stimulate narratives about Palestine and also to stimulate ways to amplify the voices from the ground. And then that led to starting a temporary design program where we were really focusing on kind of craft and ways of making and how through collaboration, design, how can we organize ourselves differently and work differently as designers to counteract injustice. And here you see some examples, and then after 2 years, these were the graduates that had a master's degree, and many of them are still based in Amsterdam and do incredible work and collaborate, and it's continuous energy and fight that was rooted in this master's program. So to round off, what I want to stress is that the object of the book has become a subject. So the subject is someone or something who acts themselves, and an object who is acted upon. Subjectivity is placed in response to objectivity. Factual information replaced with information that derives from someone's own experience. A subjective atlas speaks, takes a position, and is active. It moves from statement to experience, from observation to relationality, from objectivity to positionality, and from neutrality to politics. It focuses on situated knowledge, positionality, reflexivity, and performativity. In this way, the Atlas draws attention to the importance of intuition in social life and in knowledge production. And it argues for more participative map-making methods to foster shared authorship and collective belonging to a place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annelys, for this insightful presentation. I would say that we can open it up to questions, observations, comments, anything that comes up. This is a really great opportunity to ask more about the project, the method itself, some of the additions, right? So we have some questions already. I'm happy to pass on the microphone.
I break the ice. Thank you for your great presentation. My name is Ferro, and I teach here in the department.
Microphone, please.
A little bit closer, yeah.
Hello. Are you okay like that?
That's brilliant.
Okay. All right. So my name is Ferro. I teach urban sociology here in Rome, and I'm also interested in alternative cartography. In fact, I'm also working on representation of Rome historically through cartographic imagination. So I'm wondering if your approach, there is a space for the concept of opacity by Edouard Glissant, that not everything, not every experience have to be, visible or make it apparent. So is there a way that your approach considers not making the invisible visible?
No, I think that's a very crucial question. But I think what happens in the atlas is that it's the people themselves choosing what they want to show and what they do not want to show. So it's about their perspective in what they want to unveil and what they do not want to unveil. So I think so they can sometimes it is also even ambiguous or opaque what they show or the perspective. But I think they have agency over the way their narrative or their perspective is being shown. So it's I think also the atlas is a small collection of perspectives, and it leaves more out than it leaves in. But however, it shows some it opens a gaze or a perspective to the lived experiences of people who want to share it.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the work. It's really quite moving and very powerful. I'm wondering about what happens after the atlas is published, and even as the atlas is being workshopped. How do you expand the participation to people beyond the immediacy of the workshop itself? And so, obviously, in an academic context. For instance, the workshop on Friday will be limited to those who know about it, that can get into Cabot, that have the time to do so, and it will represent a certain subjectivity of Rome, but a highly subjective subjectivity, if that's possible to say. But then when published, people will find out about it, and then we'll say, yeah, this is great. How do you then amplify or continue to develop that atlas in the urban and social context in which it was first produced?
Well, there's several layers. Of course, it's a selective group of people who join these workshops. But then it's important to see, okay, which communities do we address and how do these people come in? And for instance, we were this year in the Philippines, and the ones who started this atlas felt it was really important to work with the fishermen communities who would never go to such a workshop. So we worked with, they were in contact with the representatives of this community, and then we paid all of them to join the workshop, and this way they were part of it. And so it was also, it was the people in the Philippines said, okay, we really need these voices to be part of the book, because they are really, their life is under threat, like also with everything that happened in the West Philippine Sea. But it's still, when the atlas comes out, most other people did not participate. And then, there's always been a tension between, okay, maybe this atlas should be online so it can be an ever-growing archive. But at the same time, then it's also sometimes hard, because then, where to stop? And an atlas of a book allows a certain beginning and an end, and allows a momentum, and that also is very beneficial to have that momentum. So it's also a bit searching, because both have its limitations. But then, for instance, in Amsterdam, it's the architecture center. They work with the public libraries in Amsterdam, and then they put these atlases in the library as temporary exhibitions. And then, as a visitor, you don't just borrow the book, but you borrow a story. So you can make an appointment by someone who made a contribution in the atlas, and then have a conversation or have a guided tour. So the people who contributed to the atlas are now connected to the architecture center to actually give alternative tours in Amsterdam. So this is a way, at least, that the narratives and their perspectives are taken further, and it's not just that they just joined the workshop and then finished. So the one who initiates it's also the one who should be be in contact with the communities. With the Atlas of Palestine, I felt really confused after the Atlas came out because it was quite successful and quite seen. And then I realized it's not benefiting the community that made the Atlas. And that was also part of the incentive of starting the design label and thinking of a model that would be reciprocal, that what is being made is also feeding back the people who make it. So then, with the design label, people buy the products. That allows for new production, and it continues. And so there's a continuity. And with the Atlas, I think that's something to really try to activate with each new collaboration. So now in Bosnia, they would like to use this book in high schools. Well, not that the high schools already accept it, but it's like this organization really tries to stimulate that it becomes more of an educational tool, and then maybe connect it also to workshops where the children will also draw Bosnia-Herzegovina or make alternative flags. So each time in each context, we figure out like, okay, how can we activate it?
Hi, well, thank you for the presentation. By the way, can I cheat and ask actually 2 questions? Okay, one is from a methodological standpoint. You actually told us that there's a prevalence of the visual point of view in a way, and of course it makes perfect sense. So I've seen by browsing the atlases that sometimes the translation in a way, like the medium translation from non-visual to visual, was actually very effective. I was wondering, have you encountered a case in which the original narrative in a way was somewhat sound or music based, and how did you translate that? I mean, I have an example with the music collections of Palestine, which is a treasure trove, by the way, but I was wondering if you had other examples. The second question is somewhat, I mean, I know a list of one case, besides the one you mentioned, where an atlas has become educational material, case in point. Do you know of other occurrences of this, if it's been used in, well, possibly higher education, but in any other educational environment? Thank you.
Thank you. So there have been more ideas around sound, and sometimes it's or moving image. But what happens is that a couple of times we had QR codes. So someone made Sounds of Amsterdam, that's in the Atlas of Amsterdam. Now also in Bosnia-Herzegovina, someone made all kind of urban sounds of Sarajevo. And so each sound is on SoundCloud, and you scan the QR code. And also now there's, in the Atlas of Lubumbashi, there was someone who presented all kind of traditional music instruments, and actually we also witnessed a concert, and we filmed this concert, and now if you read the QR code, you see the concert of the instruments that you see photographed in the book. So that's a nice way to check. And maybe you could answer the second question. How the Atlas is used in an educational context.
Well, we're using it right now at John Cabot University in the critical mapping course, and I have an exponent of that who I will allow to speak because it's also interesting to have students speaking. Allison Ladd.
Hello, I'm Allison. But I think it's also, I was thinking a lot about what you said about your son as well, and this idea of how to present this idea of cartography as something that's not necessarily objective, but maybe like not just collaborative, but also didactic, for example. And just thinking about it like that, and like you said, it's not a beginning and an end, but just very momentous, I guess. And so that's what we're doing, and reaching out as a collaboration. For example, we're working on putting up a book, but it's very much not a beginning and an end. And there's also very much different ways of how to imagine, for example, a nation, or even like, for example, the sea, and that's something that's not necessarily national. And so I think there's just an infinite ways to think about it, and so to make it not objective, like you said.
It was also when we had the workshop in Sarajevo, one of the participants, when we did the drawing the maps of Bosnia, she said, and I think she was 20, something like this, and she said, I wish I would have done this when I was young, because I never thought I could draw my own borders. And it was just the exercise of drawing to her own country that kind of liberated her idea of thinking, oh yeah, but borders are a human choice. Like we can define borders on different ways. And that really struck me, that comment. I thought, this is something to keep or to do something more with.
Don't know whether there are any other questions. Tommaso.
Hi, thank you for your presentation once again. I feel like I'm the 10th person to say that, but it just popped into my mind because I saw this Cat Clan page from the Brussels Subjective Atlas. So I was wondering how and when you felt the need to include different than human lives, so animals, plants, that stuff. Thank you.
I'll get my steps in.
Well, there is a certain limitation in the book that it's human, people making the perspective, and sometimes that's also the question, like, should we also include a non-human perspective, but how to do that? But then I also felt like, no, but it's really about lived experience, and we can, as a human, we cannot speak as a non-human. So like how to do that, or how to include these non-human perspectives. So I don't have a clear answer, but I do feel like, there's a question. And then this person, she really wanted to map the life of the cats. For her, this was really important, and also she thinks she's very sensitive for community. And then she said, because then there's the cat from their neighbors, and then our cat is there. And so by having, I think she had 2 cats, and then a stray cat. And so this allowed her to have this weird experience. And so she asked, can I map the life of the cats around my house? And I think that the point is that not necessarily that the cats are so important, but if you take this particular perspective and you map this particular perspective, you're allowing to, maybe this page tells something about the neighbors and about community and about how the neighbors relate to each other, but the perspective is by mapping the cats. And I think that's interesting, right? This maybe very particular perspective, and in this way, opening up, and maybe in this way allowing also more non-human perspectives, or the life of plants. I mean, there's also many plants in the atlas. But then I think it's always important, why does this person want to map these plants? So always trying somehow or somewhere to give access to, or to visibility to this kind of relationship.
I don't know if there are any other questions. Yes.
Thank you a lot. It was very interesting. And I have a question, because I lived in Colombia so many years, and I saw that you made an atlas of Colombia too. And I don't know if in this case you also engaged the indigenous people, because in Colombia there are so diverse groups of people. So obviously there's violence, there are little people, there are poverty, but there are the Spanish inheritance, the indigenous inheritance, the Negro inheritance. So it's the indigenous people has completely different shape of the country, not the country, the land, because they don't consider even the country the nation. No? So in this case, could be interesting to mix all these different layers of the culture. I don't know, maybe Colombia is particular, but there are so many other countries that are like this. I don't know, this is the question, because I didn't see the book here.
Well, actually, with making the Atlas of Colombia, I was very little involved, because it was a Colombian, an Amsterdam-based Colombian designer, who became a friend and who said, I really want to make this atlas. So it was him kind of also reconnecting with Colombia, and he was the one giving all the workshops and actually making the whole atlas. And then I was in contact with him, but he was doing all the work. I can't really speak about all the layers in Colombia, but I do think yeah, it was also for him quite hard to actually to find support, and then also Colombia is so big, so there's a lot of traveling involved. So I think it was mostly based on, yeah, I think Bogota, Medellin, and then the coastal area.
It's connected a bit with the question you made before, because how to have a group, how to organize a group, how to choose.
No, I think it always lacks. But then what I think is important, it's also throughout the series that I do more and more, is to really give transparency about like how is this atlas made, who took the initiative, how did we get, So and also at the end of the book there's an index with portraits of people who contribute, so that as a reader you understand, okay, this is the way this one is made, this atlas is made.
Really subjective.
Yeah. And that and so and we acknowledge that it's completely incomplete, and but this is the choices that have been made, and through these choices, this came out.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, observations? Now maybe I can say one thing quickly, kind of coming back a little bit with this thing that Christopher was talking about, and kind of your response to Christopher's comment about momentum, also kind of commenting a little bit on how our collaboration got to come together. I do think of this project as something that needs to be born in a specific time and place, right? It has the sort of its presence, its materiality, and I also was thinking about the fact that it had to happen in that particular moment, right? Because there was a set of different circumstances, right, that led to us wanting to explore that specific topic at that moment. Me and Chiara have been working through our project on site for quite a long time with this idea of kind of reinterpreting public spaces, hacking public spaces, and intervening, right, in one way or another within public spaces. At the same time, I'm also thinking about the fact that last year was an important year for Rome, because the project that Cabot did, which is a museum of active hospitality, those of you who are not familiar, it's a project that is situated inside of Spin Time. Here we have one representative, Jessica, right there, who actually was working on the Biennale project this year, right? So the Austrian pavilion of the Biennale this year has the map of Rome, right, which is a counter map. It is a form of alternative cartography, and today we were actually sitting, that photo that you sneaked of us, right? We were actually sitting with Julia, who is a member of Stalker Collective and of Mado Space, and we were talking about that exactly and kind of putting all of those different pieces together. So also there, I think it is very important to acknowledge the fact that some different circumstances and the context need to come together in order to allow for a project like that to actually be born in a specific place. And I think that you are also very sensitive to that happening, right? We were also talking earlier about how you feel and try to understand whether it's the right moment to do the map, right, in a specific sort of a place, or counter map in this case. And it does seem that for Rome it is an important moment, right? So even that initiative that does an incredible kind of revolutionary work of counter mapping the housing movement, right, the housing crisis in general, the work that the Biennale, the Austrian Pavilion has presented through the work that is bottom-up, right, so kind of corresponding in terms of methodologies. So I do think that we already have the sort of a starting ground to correspond to methodology and the ethics that I think are very central for the way in which you work and engage with different communities. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Nice.
I don't know if there are no other questions, comments. Maybe we could wrap it up here. One quick announcement, actually three quick announcements. So one, we are doing the workshop on Friday, right? We start at 10 o'clock in the morning, we finish at 1. Today we talk more about, right, the way in which project works, the different phases of the project. On Friday it's going to be a hands-on workshop in which we will draw, we will map, there'll be different sort of exercises. The workshop will take place here. It's open to JCU community and to students coming from other universities and school and study abroad programs. So sign up, right? The information is on JCU website. So there is a limit of participation, which is 30 participants, but I think that we can be somewhat flexible around that and kind of maybe organizing more groups. So feel free to participate. It will be really great to continue, right? Considering the fact that you were part of this experience, you know about the project, it would be really nice to continue. And then just a few more announcements. This is about the public program of Media and Communications Department, right? We have a couple more events coming up in November. One is Elisa Giardina Papa coming on the 12th of November. Another one is 20th of November with Omar Al-Ghazi. So stay tuned. Also there you can find all the info on the website, and seem like, I'm doing like a stand-up comedian at this point. And also, if you all want to come and check out the books, right, and talk to Annelys about it, I think that we do have a little bit of time. We do have the space until 8:30, so feel free to come and check in and talk about it.
If people want to buy the book, it's also possible.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Do you want to also?
Yeah, if you want to buy the book, it's also possible.
I want to apologize when I talk about Negro community, because I was thinking in Spanish, sorry. Because I live there, it's a black community, obviously, sorry. It was just...
And thank you all so much for coming tonight. Thank you.